What happens when an entire district of a great coastal city slowly slips beneath the sea, its streets, quays, and monuments sinking into water while the rest of the city continues above? Along the Mediterranean shoreline of northern Egypt, the modern city of Alexandria stretches wide across the coast. Traffic moves along bright avenues, fishing boats drift across the harbor, the horizon appears calm, blue, and endless. Yet beneath those waters, another landscape lies hidden. Just offshore, massive stone blocks rest across the seabed. Columns lie tilted in sand. Foundations trace the outlines of walls that once bordered ancient harbors. Statues carved from granite lie on their sides, worn smooth by centuries beneath the sea. These remains belong to Alexandria's ancient royal quarter. Long ago, this part of the city occupied a narrow stretch of land projecting into the Mediterranean. Palaces, ceremonial buildings, harbors, and docks stood along the water's edge. The district formed the political and maritime center of the ancient city, a place where monumental architecture faced directly toward the sea. From above, the coastline appears stable, but the land beneath Alexandria has never been entirely still. The city sits on the edge of the Nile Delta, where layers of soft sediment meet the Mediterranean basin. Over centuries, earthquakes and gradual subsidence altered the shoreline. Parts of the ancient harbor district began to sink. Sections of quays slipped below sea level. Buildings that once stood beside dry docks slowly entered the water. Unlike cities destroyed in a single moment, Alexandria's royal quarter changed gradually. Stone structures tilted, foundations cracked. Entire segments of the waterfront disappeared beneath waves. And so the question rises from beneath the harbor floor. How could one of the most powerful urban districts of the ancient Mediterranean quietly slip below the sea, while the city itself continued to thrive above? The Mediterranean remains calm today, but the submerged ruins suggest a coastline that has never stopped moving. Before the shoreline began to shift, Alexandria's royal quarter occupied one of the most prominent positions along the Mediterranean coast. The district stretched across a peninsula that projected into a broad natural harbor. From this vantage point, the city controlled both maritime access and inland routes that connected the Mediterranean world to the Nile Valley. The harbor itself was divided into protected basins by long stone breakwaters and artificial moles. These structures calmed incoming waves and created stable docking areas where ships could anchor safely. Quays lined the edges of the harbor, their stone blocks carefully fitted to withstand tides and heavy cargo traffic. Within the royal quarter, monumental architecture dominated the landscape. Large courtyards opened toward the sea. Massive columns supported porticos facing the harbor. Stone-paved roads connected ceremonial spaces to administrative buildings and waterfront docks. Warehouses and service structures clustered near the quays, forming the operational heart of the port district. The entire area was designed to integrate land and sea. Ships approaching the harbor would have passed directly alongside monumental buildings rising above the shoreline. The visual effect must have been striking. Architecture reflecting sunlight across calm water, stone surfaces visible from far offshore. The construction materials reflect the ambition of the district. Granite blocks transported from southern Egypt were used for statues and structural supports. Limestone formed the bulk of walls and pavements. Columns were carved from massive stone drums, stacked carefully one upon another. Yet beneath this impressive architecture lay fragile geological foundations. The Nile Delta region consists largely of layered sediment, clay, and silt deposited by the river over thousands of years. These materials are fertile and workable, but they are also prone to slow compression and movement. When combined with seismic activity along nearby fault zones, the stability of the coastline becomes uncertain. For centuries, the royal quarter appeared secure, but below its monumental structures, the ground was gradually shifting. Over centuries, the forces shaping Alexandria's coastline worked slowly and almost invisibly. The Mediterranean tides moved against the harbor walls. Layers of sediment beneath the city compacted under the weight of massive stone structures. And at intervals, earthquakes rippled through the eastern Mediterranean basin. Each event altered the balance slightly. Stone blocks shifted by small degrees, foundations settled unevenly. Sections of the shoreline dropped just enough for seawater to reach areas that had once remained dry. What had once been solid ground gradually became vulnerable to flooding. Unlike sudden disasters that leave clear layers of destruction, the transformation of Alexandria's royal quarter unfolded across generations. A quay that once held steady above the tide began to sit lower each year. Harbor steps that once descended neatly to the waterline slowly disappeared beneath it. Walls that had stood firmly upright tilted slightly as the ground beneath them softened. At first, these changes may have seemed minor, small adjustments in a living city accustomed to constant repair. But the process continued. Seismic tremors occasionally shook the coastline, accelerating subsidence. In some areas, blocks collapsed from their original positions and slid into the harbor. Large statues toppled as supporting foundations shifted. Segments of breakwater fractured and scattered across the seabed. Gradually, the boundary between land and sea moved inward. Parts of the royal quarter slipped below the waterline entirely. Harbor structures became submerged. Stone columns that once stood proudly above courtyards came to rest horizontally beneath shallow waves. Today, divers moving across the seabed encounter these remains in remarkable clarity. Walls extend across sandy bottoms. Colossal statues lie partially buried in sediment. Architectural fragments form recognizable patterns across the submerged harbor floor. The underwater district is not random debris. It is the outline of a once organized urban landscape, preserved beneath quiet Mediterranean water. Today, the waters off Alexandria's coast appear calm and familiar. Fishing boats move slowly across the harbor. Sunlight reflects off the surface in shifting bands of silver and blue. From the shoreline, it is difficult to imagine that an entire district of the ancient city lies just below the waves. Yet beneath the harbor floor, the royal quarter remains. Divers exploring the seabed have mapped streets, foundations, and monumental fragments scattered across the submerged landscape. Massive granite statues rest in soft sediment. Sections of ancient quays extend outward beneath the water. Columns and carved stone blocks lie where the shoreline once stood. These remains reveal something unusual. Unlike cities abandoned and reclaimed by desert or vegetation, Alexandria's lost quarter did not vanish through neglect. It was gradually surrendered to the sea while the rest of the city continued to grow nearby. The transformation was geological rather than cultural, a shift in the land itself. The Nile Delta remains one of the most dynamic landscapes on Earth. Sediments move, shorelines advance and retreat. Subtle tectonic movement continues beneath the eastern Mediterranean. What happened to the royal quarter was not a single isolated event, but part of a much longer pattern of coastal change. And yet the underwater remains preserve an extraordinary record. The arrangement of quays, foundations, and monumental fragments still reflects the deliberate design of an ancient harbor district. Even after centuries beneath the sea, the geometry of the city can still be traced. And so the question returns, how can one of the ancient world's most powerful urban districts disappear beneath the Mediterranean while the city itself survives? Perhaps the answer lies in the shifting relationship between land and sea. Cities may appear permanent, but coastlines rarely are. Alexandria continues to live above the harbor. Below it, the royal quarter rests quietly in filtered light, an ancient shoreline written in stone beneath the Mediterranean. If this quiet journey beneath Alexandria's harbor has stayed with you, you may wish to continue exploring these hidden ancient landscapes. And what do you think shapes coastal cities more over time, human design or the slow movement of the earth itself?